Hi, this is Mike from BandLab, and in this video we're going to make a hardcore rave beat in BandLab's free online DAW. You can open this project yourself with the link in the video description, and if you find this guide useful, please hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be the first to know when new videos drop. I begin by setting the project tempo to 140 beats per minute, and the project key to F major. I'd like to base this track around a breakbeat, so we can find some breaks in the BandLab's Sounds Rave 2020 pack. Rave 2020 Beat 05 is the sort of sound I'm looking for, so I drag it into the project. I'd like to layer this up with the 909 beat, and this pack has some ready-made 909 loops. I drag Rave 2020 Beat 01 onto the project as well. I set the breakbeat track to -5 dB and the 909 track to -3 dB. Musically, I'd definitely like to have a big anthemic piano line in there, so I create a new virtual instrument track and set the instrument to keyboards, pianos, Studio Grand. I turn this track down to -14.5 dB, then create a new Midi clip by double-clicking on the track. I program a piano part that skips between the root note on the lower octave and the chord an octave up. It plays F major, G major, G sharp major, and A sharp major. To make things a little more interesting, I move the third of the first two instances in the last chord up a semitone, turning them from a major into a suspended fourth. I duplicate these notes onto the second two bars. To duplicate notes or MIDI clips in BandLab, you highlight them, hold Option on Mac or Alt on Windows, then drag them into the new position. The second time around, I move the fifth of the first instance in the final chord up 2 semitones, turning it into a D sharp major in the second inversion. This gives us a pleasing melodic movement down for the last 3 chords. To give this piano part a more vibrant feel, I open up the effects panel and add the modulation ST chorus effect. I set the rate to 8.2 and the depth to 54%. I'd also like the piano's highs and mids to push a little harder, so I add a tone, graphic EQ, and boost 400 Hz by 1.7 dB, and the 1.6 kHz band by 2.1 dB. Next, I need a bass line, so I add a virtual instrument track and select Basses, Synth Basses, Lately Bass. I turn this track down to -7.5 dB. Then, I program in a bass line that follows the root note of the chords. I want to push the lows and the highs of the sound, so I add a graphic EQ and I boost the 100 Hz band by 2.8 dB, the 200 Hz band by 1.5 dB, and finally the 3.2 kHz band by 7.1 dB. I want a sustained string to accompany the piano, so I add another instrument track, and this time select Strings, String Orchestra. I turn this track down to -24 dB. I program a sustained F7 note that dips down to the D sharp for one beat. To make the string sound less harsh and more natural, I add a reverb, studio reverb effect, setting the mix to 1.7 and the size to 2.6. I'd also like a vocal. In BandLab's Sounds, I click the Loops tab, then set the instruments filter to voice and the genres filter to electronic. Scandy Pop Vox 01 is what I'm after, so I drag this into the project and duplicate it out so that it lasts for the whole 4-bar clip. I then turn this track down to -3.5 dB. Hardcore rave tracks tend to have many different sections and elements, so I want to switch up the piano with another ravey riff. I return to the Rave 2020 pack to find something that complements the existing elements. Rave 2020 Synth 02 works great with the beat and the bass line, so I drag it into the project and turn it down to -3 dB. I'd also like to switch things up with the darker section to contrast with the uplifting vibes. I like the sound used in Rave 2020 Synth 01, but I want it to play with a different pattern. In this case, I'll create a sampler track and drag it onto the first pad. I move the sample end marker to the end of the first note, giving me a single isolated note. I'd like to play this note on different pitches, so I right-click the pad and select Copy, then paste it onto the second and third pads, again using the right-click menu. I use the pitch parameters to tune the second version to +5 semitones and the third version to +6 semitones. I then program a ravey riff that hits all 3 notes. I also add a delay, D-delay effect, setting the time to 0.641 Hz, the feedback to 11%, and the wet level to 45. Then I turn the track down to -1 dB. This stab had kind of a bassy feel and is already quite percussive, so I don't want to use the lately bass patch with it. Instead, I'd like to use a sine wave style sub-bass patch. I create a new instrument track and select basses, synth basses, sine bass. I turn the track down to -14 dB. I program a simple bass line that plays an F and an A sharp. I want a darker vocal for this section, so again I turn to the loops panel and set the filters to voice and electronic. I drag Vox 1 old school breakbeat A minor 133 BPM onto a new audio track, and then I turn the track down to -3 dB. I use the handles at the bottom left and right hand corner to truncate the clip around the second part of the vocal. Then I duplicate it out to create a stuttered pattern that fits with the stab and bass. I have all the elements I need for the arrangement now, though it would be useful to have some transitional effects too, specifically a white noise riser and a crash cymbal. In BandLab's Sounds, I search filters and enter white noise into the text field. I drag Batter Medium White Noise Filter up into the project, truncating the end so that it segues smoothly into the next section. I turn this track down to -6 dB. I enter Crash into the text search field, then drag Silver Yacht Crash onto the start of the project. I turn this track down to -6 dB as well. For the arrangement, I begin with the beats, dropping the bass on bar 9. The The vocals are then added before the first breakdown where the piano appears. The string heightens the tension before the beats and bass drop. The vocal then reappears. Next, the piano is replaced by the ravey stab loop. The vocals come in again before the second, darker section arrives. In this part of the track, the beats, bass, and vocal are added and removed relatively quickly to keep things moving. After another mini breakdown, the bass and piano drop again. The vocal and strings make a reappearance at the track crescendos. The track finishes with the pianos, vocals, and bass. You can fork this project and make your own version of it using the link in the video description. Have fun!